I was very much inclined when I was 16, 17, that were the years when you ended up here, the baccalaureate, the high school. I was very much tempted by what we call humanist studies, let's say philosophy, painting, literature, and I was, let's say, thinking I would like to be a writer or I would like to be a painter, and I'm very much taken by painting. I had been born in the city of 13,000 inhabitants, no? And then my father was an engineer there, and he told me, why instead of just studying just philosophy, you don't try to something that could be more related with daily life needs? And he suggested to me, why not you do architecture? And I came to study here architecture without the clear conviction that I should be an architect. Having spent all my life with this job, with this work, I don't see myself anything else by being an architect. I wouldn't consider any other profession by that, and with all the difficulties that has nowadays the profession, I like to see the world through the eyes of being an architect. It seems to me that being an architect asks me to think about why the shape of the things are the way they are, why the form, the trees or the animals or the houses or the dresses, and just thinking what is behind the things you use or the things you like, throughout the use it has given to you, the profession, is a great way of being in the world. And even more when you consider that you live in a very much, let's say, mankind created world, and then thinking that all the world surrounding you, the built world, you are continuously questioning why it has the shape it has, and which was behind the man or woman who created the world you are still living on, is a great way of being in the world. And I don't have doubts about what I made of my life. As much as the building, even in what people expect the building to be today, is going to be permeated by the architect's personality, it's also quite true that once the building is built, you has transferred to the building an entity that gives to the building the ability to live by themselves. The buildings are and have their own life as much as the humans have. And then therefore I speak about the life of the buildings, and therefore even as an architect I am so engaged when so many times in my career it has happened to me to stretch on and then to help other buildings to live farther. I mean, even in Madrid, to think about the Atocha railway station, where we have been, even in my own life, to grow twice, even now by the third time, you need to adjust to something that asks the building to be stretched on, or even the extension of the Prado, where you need to rethink again what the Prado was and how it has been enlarged and what will mean to give it the possibility of adding some new piece of land and how it will change it. Or even in the Bank of Spain, finishing the corner that still was missing. Therefore, to see one architect's life related with the life of buildings as a whole seems to me one of the experiences that I had throughout my career. Architecture is necessarily and mandatorily related with materials. It is impossible to think in architectural terms without thinking about which materials you will be able to build what you want to do. I mean, it is completely different to think in architectural form without just identifying which material it should be built. Architecture, no matter that you could think it is the result of an intellectual creation, or it has some structure that is the mind product, and you can speak about an abstract structure that is behind building. I think that architecture is mandatorily related with materials. The culture of the people are depositing in buildings what they would like to be. But that happens if you think about in the greatest buildings, those that somehow are going a bit further away from what is needed. That at the end, those that are considered to be architecturally, in the architectural history, the great buildings are always something that they said goes a bit further the way of utilitarian, and instead they collect all those wishes and all those attempts, and all those concerns, of all those way of describing and thinking the world. In a building, you're able to see how people are thinking, what in the logic that is behind buildings, you're able to discover what society in a period, in a moment of time, thought about things that should be. Then I like buildings that doesn't impose themselves how buildings ought to be used. It's true that there are buildings that could be thought almost like machines, but they would be, there are not so many in which it happened this way. That there are many times where buildings leaves people the freedom to use them in an undetermined way. I like when I go to a building to enjoy it without feeling that it has been predetermined how the building is going to be used. And that is valuable for both the monuments and the daily life buildings as well. That brings us into another different issue that is a very important one, and is I think that architectural criticism, the way we have seen and look at architecture in the latest year, has emphasized a bit too much the fact that buildings are objects. You will hear very, very often architectural critics using the word objects, giving buildings this kind of autonomy, this kind of self-sufficiency that characterize what objects are. I have doubts about whether or not buildings can be considered as subjects. The more I see how the practice happens and what buildings are, the more I resist to believe that buildings are objects. And instead, buildings are most of the times inserted in a broader reality, that is the reality of the city. And the reality of the city asks for, when you think about the building, don't be forgotten and being considered as well. If that is the case, then the building overcomes, let's say, the change and the reduction of being considered an object and becomes to be seen as a part of a broader, larger reality that is the city. To see buildings not just finishing or just being, let's say, submitted to context, but much more contributing to just creating this larger reality that is the city. And therefore, I indeed like to see buildings as a part of the cities. And the more I work, I would like to consider, when I design something, I am the end, the latest frontier for what you do is the city instead of the building. Well, even if you admit that very often architects work in cities, it's impossible. Don't be, let's say, affected, don't be sensible to what history is. And that doesn't mean that you are just, you are suffering coercion from history. Instead, I would like to see the understanding of what the history behind what the city is, as something that actually helps architects to think about. Even I am now finishing this building in Berlin that is between two buildings by Schinkel. It wouldn't be possible to do something there without paying the tribute of respect you believe Schinkel deserved. That was a very singular occasion, and the circumstances were so specific that impossible to don't think in terms in which history appears as a very present component of what this building should be. But for me, in this case, the presence of Schinkel wasn't something, let's say, reducing my capacity as an architect. Just the contrary, it has given to me the opportunity to this reflection about which kind of building should be between these two Schinkel buildings. I think that whoever feels attracted by this profession, he or she should try to do that. Because it's true that what has been the profession is changing, and the new means of production are just changing the figure of how big buildings are built and so on. And yet it will be still room for just making the profession not so different from what has been in the past. And therefore, don't believe that changes in the social structure of the profession are meaning the exclusive way of thinking to be an architect. If they believe that what the design has meant in the past still could happen, they don't have a wrong idea about that could happen. And therefore, I think that this is a very rewarding profession in terms of experience and in terms of being in the world. And I will encourage them to do so, even though the times are difficult and the bureaucracy is invading and entering, and then this sense of individuality related with architecture is going to be more and more difficult in the days to come. But even I will dare to say more about that, and is whoever feels that he or she likes architecture and instead don't want to run through all the difficulties of the exercise of the profession, they have the alternative of just thinking, studying architecture, just considering what has been built. I mean, to enjoy architecture, studying architecture in what we have received as a legacy of the built world would allow whoever wants to be an architect, because being an architect is also being able to explain and being able to fully understand what is behind buildings. And to be an architect, probably you don't need either, and to feel as an architect, you don't need either to be a builder. And therefore, I wouldn't say that regardless the present condition, whoever loves architecture should be and should enter into these studies without any concern. Then that be sure that this is a profession that gives you a great way of looking things.
No, pero esa aquí se ve, bueno, la planta un poquito más grande.
Un poquito más grande, sí.
Es que eso yo creo que esto...
Obviously, buildings are not thought nowadays the way they used to be. I mean, in a way, the architectural drawing hasn't been the same throughout history. But since the Renaissance, when painters and architects discovered how to represent buildings throughout the rules of drawing, architecture has been thought just making the tool of drawing as unconscious and underneath the structure that was used for thinking about what the building should. And therefore, drawing has been very consubstantial with how the building has been thought and lately has been built. We are thinking buildings nowadays with different ways that it has been in the past. We are not thinking buildings anymore as something similar to live beings. The idea of something that is the metaphor of the parallel with nature doesn't happen anymore. Instead, it's much more an idea of assemblage, an idea of aggregating things and lately given form that probably finds in the computer one way of reaffirming that drawing is not so needed, and drawing is not so needed as it was, and surely that will affect what buildings and what architecture will be. But still will be people enjoying to think buildings throughout drawing. I still come to the office with the willingness of just enjoying the process of thinking how the design proceeds. I would say that one of the most rewarding experiences for the designer is to see and to experience how ideas evolve. And obviously, for whoever has been connected with buildings all their life, I will say that to enjoy the sights, I like the sights. I like to see, to emerge, and then to see how something that wasn't is becoming to take form throughout and just serving the drawings you did, and having lived all my life this way, and in spite of my age, as much as I feel the wish and the desire behind me of doing that, it seems to me that I should keep the practice alive.